All right, so this is a really great honor to be up here to talk to you today. Although I have to admit, I'm a little bit upset today because I thought I was special. Frida is my sister. I've known her practically my whole life, and I thought she treated me specially, only to hear all these people calling her a sister and whatnot. And then furthermore, she has me talk after Thomas. What the heck is that? Anyway, today I want to talk about innovation, and I'll start off first just giving a little bit of background about me. So this is cheating a little bit with some show and tell. Even though I'm part of the Zambian diaspora, my parents were part of a South African diaspora that settled in Zambia during the apartheid regime. And so here is a photo of me with my mom. And I'm dating myself because that car was not an antique when this picture was taken. This next photo, many of you will recognize. And this is our rite of passage into adulthood, right? Once you get one of these, it's like, I'm set. And if you're Soneka, it's like, now I can drink Mosi. And I came to the US for college. I eventually settled in Silicon Valley, and I spent most of my career at a company called Intuit. This is my first Intuit badge. And I like to share this picture as a cautionary tale to those of you who are younger. Take good care of yourself, otherwise this is what happens. But anyway, I studied computer engineering at Intuit. I started out as a developer. I worked on QuickBooks for most of my time there. Eventually, I was VP of Innovation. So innovation is something I'm very passionate about and something I would like to talk to you about today. Since then, I've been doing multiple things, but I spend most of my time on a startup called Ujama. And maybe if we have Q&A later, I'll talk more about that. But let's talk about innovation. So let me ask you, what do you think are the biggest underutilized assets in most companies? People? Okay. Well, I think that's a good answer, but I'll be more specific. It's actually the ideas in the employees' heads. So why do I say that? Well, it's for something that we call the insight-decision divide. And what that refers to is that most companies, if you're a frontline employee, you spend most of your day working on the product or serving customers. And so you are bombarded with insights on how to improve the product or how to serve customers better. But it turns out a lot of people are not interested in what you think. And in fact, those decisions about products and how to serve customers are made by senior executives. But how do senior executives spend most of their day? In meetings with other executives, right? So you have this divide between where insights are happening and where decisions are being made. And hence this problem, this underutilized assets. So that results in missed opportunities. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story of Steve Wozniak. Before he co-founded Apple, he was actually an engineer at HP. And he had he had tooled around, he had built a prototype of a personal computer. This was before the PC era. And he begged HP, hey, let's turn this into a product. And they turned him down 5 times. And eventually he met Steve Jobs at the Homebrew meetup. And the rest is history, and Apple was, became the behemoth it is today. So HP missed out on the start of the PC revolution, even though one of their own employees had that idea, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. So there's this other gentleman, Paul Buchheit. He worked at Google. Now, Google, from their very early stage, they said, we want to capture employees' ideas. And so they actually built a program called 20% Time, which says 20% of your time at work, you can spend it any way you want to, work on your own ideas. And so Paul had been working on a project called Google Groups, which they decided to shut down. But he was playing around with the code, and he said, I can make an email client. He actually did that in one day. And eventually, he got the support of the company, and that became Gmail, which, as you know, today is the #1 used email platform in the world. But that was this guy's idea. So what the most innovative companies do is they've learned that they must empower their employees to work on their own ideas. And in fact, I'm very passionate about this topic about empowering employees that I co-wrote a book with one of my former employees, Jeff Zayas. We call it The Entrepreneur's Journey, and we're talking about all these instances of how employees in big companies have acted like startups and have built big products. An example of it is from these are two former colleagues of mine from Intuit. They actually built the first mobile tax application. And back when they came up with this idea, this was in the very early days of the iPhone, this notion that somebody would want to do taxes on their phone just sounded like a ridiculous idea. But they had this insight that, well, the phone has a camera, you can take pictures, and we can use optical character recognition to recognize the text, and that would make it easier than people having to enter in their tax forms. Anyway, it ended up, they didn't have to convince anyone because Intuit had a program called Unstructured Time where they could work on their own ideas, and eventually they proved that this was a great idea, and it's helped sustain TurboTax's dominance in the self-prep market. Another team I'll just mention is from a company called Atlassian. They're out of Australia, but it's a very successful company in the developer space. But Atlassian has a program where once a quarter they shut the company down so that employees can work on their own ideas. And these group of 5 employees, they had an idea to turn Jira, which was a platform built for developers, and they said, let's actually turn it into something that call centers can use. So they built this Jira service desk in one day, and eventually it was productized, and it became the fastest growing product in Atlassian's history. So this notion that you can take very simple ideas from very small teams and turn them into something great, again, that's what innovative companies are doing. And so just to make a turn here, I'll just remind you that all companies actually started off with small teams, with humble beginnings. And I'm sure you've heard of some of these. But this, again, I mentioned Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They started, the two of them. They actually worked in Steve Jobs' parents' garage, building computers by hand themselves. That's literally how they started in forming Apple. Another story is of Sergey and Larry Page from Google. They actually started in a friend's garage. And of course, Google is a big behemoth today. You might recognize this guy. This is Mark Zuckerberg. So he literally started Facebook in his dorm room. And last one I would share is Scott Cook, who's the founder of Intuit. And again, I mentioned I spent 22 years of my career there. So the famous story with Scott Cook was his insight came when he saw his wife trying to balance her checkbook, and she was having a hard time. And he said the thought that occurred to him is that she's one of the smartest people I know. If she's struggling with this, I'm sure a lot of other people are struggling. And so that's where he came up with this idea, let me build a software program to help people with that. And that led to Quicken, and then eventually, of course, the big success that Intuit is today. So when you think about that, think about Silicon Valley where we live. It's a very prosperous place. There are companies being built there all the time. People moving from all around the world come to Silicon Valley to pursue their dreams. Well, Silicon Valley used to just be farms and orchards, right? It was not the case that some big conglomerate said, oh, let's go to this part of California and invest. It really just started out with a bunch of entrepreneurs. There happen to be a lot of smart people because there are a lot of good universities there. Stanford is out there, Berkeley's out there. But it was really the smart ideas and building a culture that encouraged entrepreneurship that led to Silicon Valley being what it is today. And so with that, keeping that in mind, I'll ask another question. So what will be Africa's most valuable asset in the 21st century? All right. So, some people might say, well, it's our oil or it's our copper or it's whatever our case is. But I'll argue it's our people. And in fact, Susan mentioned this earlier in her talk, right? which is, if you think about where Africa is going to be this century, in fact, in a very few years, young Africans are going to make up 42%, almost half of the world's youth. So the rest of the world is aging. So if you think about who's going to be driving innovation, change, literally who's going to actually be doing the work, it's going to be in Africa. And that's a great opportunity and responsibility that we have. And I'm excited, I'm bullish about Africa for a number of reasons, but I call it this leapfrog effect. You know, if you think about where we are today in Africa, we don't need to replicate what's been built in the developed world. And what I mean by that is, you know, in the developed world, you come to America, you know, there's a bank in every town, there's a Starbucks in every corner, et cetera. But when we start to think about banking in Africa, we start to say, well, why do it that way? We can have mobile banking, which is more efficient. You know, if we need to move money between countries, we can use blockchain. We don't need a massive grid to have electricity to all our citizens. We can build microgrids. We don't have to build power plants that spew carbon into the atmosphere. We can leverage solar. We can address how we can get to better health using telehealth. All these things are leapfrog technologies where we can actually say, you know, maybe as Sena was saying, what are we doing? We're cheating and stealing. We're cheating and stealing, and making it better, right? We don't have to replicate. We can actually jump to the front. And so I think that's what's exciting about Africa, is we have that opportunity. And in fact, it's already starting to happen. You know, one of the things that's very exciting, if you know what a unicorn is, that's a startup that's valued at more than $1 billion. So of course, there are a lot of them here in America, but what's exciting, we're already starting to see unicorns that have been birthed in Africa. So it's already starting to happen, where we're seeing now Africa is the place where you want to invest, is the place where you're going to see some really great growth. So, to conclude, if we're going to drive economic growth, we must empower our people to innovate. So we must embrace entrepreneurship. I think as Dr. Poanga was saying, you know, embracing entrepreneurship means we need to remove the obstacles for forming businesses, remove the obstacles that get in the way of people chasing these dreams. And that's what's going to create a climate where we're going to have real growth, real sustained growth. It's not about inviting parastatals from multinationals from other countries to come and invest. We can actually build these formidable economic growth engines ourselves. So with that, thank you for your time.